Are Not Forgotten and our story preservation company. So, as always, a disclaimer, I do work for Not Forgotten, but today we are just talking about the universal feeling of regret and how our time capsules can unify us in the grand scheme. So, I have a really interesting, fun episode planned for you guys today. And we're actually going to be interviewing a friend of mine who's also a clinical social worker, and her name is Lena. So, we're just going to hop right into it, and I'm going to bring her on. So, stay tuned with me. We're going to bring her on a little split screen action. Oh, there she is. Hold on.
Hello.
Let me just do this. There. I'm going to let Lena go first.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for tuning in and listening and watching. My name is Lena Suarez Angelino, and I am a licensed clinical social worker. I own my private practice and located in New Jersey, but hoping to also go into a realm of coaching where I can also expand those services and reach more people. But I am so touched and honored to be here with you all today to talk about what Not Forgotten is about, and regret, and just how we can manage and how we can cope, and through storytelling and sharing how we can connect with others and begin to heal and begin to have our stories be heard and honored and valued. So thank you so much, Elyse, for this opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. So, for anyone listening, we've all lived through COVID. It's been a crazy past few, I was going to say months, but it's been much longer than that. It kind of bleeds all together. So, we're really talking about preserving our memories, especially your legacy, and just advice to help us get through. I think really living your best life, you learn through collaboration and you learn through listening to others. I often get advice that's really helpful for me. So wouldn't it be great if you could put all that helpful advice in a time capsule and revisit it? So of course, that's what our product does. But more importantly, it does bridge the gap, especially with generations. There's a lot of elders that I know that offer a lot of wisdom. I would love to be able to just watch that video, with my grandma. My grandma made a time capsule. She has some amazing advice. So no matter what happens in the future, I will be able to show my kids that. And I think that's super important. So Lena's going to talk here a little bit about regret. And then this episode's really for anyone who likes to even journal, just kind of reflect on who you are and how you want to grow. So if you enjoy reading past journal entries in order to learn from them, in order to evaluate, what to do moving forward, this is a great episode for you. So really, that's what we're just going to hop right into it. So Lena, thank you so much for joining us today. And I can't wait to get started. So before we hop right in, you said you were a clinical social worker and a licensed counselor, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yep. So a licensed clinical social worker. I went to Monmouth University. And so I have my own private practice. I can't prescribe medication, but I help people through one-on-one therapy, sometimes group therapy, and then periodically doing webinars, podcasts, you name it, I do it.
Awesome. Yeah. So you've probably been very busy with COVID, right? Talk
Yes.
a little bit.
COVID has definitely been one for the books. It's not anything anybody could have predicted, could have prepared for. And there's kind of a joke in the social work field that, whenever we would ask our professors something, it's like, oh, well, it's on a case by case basis. So even still, I almost feel like the response to COVID would have been, well, it's a case by case basis on how your client or the person you're working with is handling it. So COVID has certainly made people and forced people to really slow down and kind of tune into themselves and notice, hey, I have a lot of anxiety, or I have a lot of symptoms of depression. I think we're still meeting a lot of people that they might say I have some tendencies of being anxious, but they don't want to get diagnosed with anxiety, or they don't want to get diagnosed with depression. And I think that still has a lot to do with the ties to stigma, and maybe just kind of misinformation about mental illness as a whole. And then what actually, anxiety, depression, maybe even schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, what they all actually mean and encompass. I come from an approach where a diagnosis really just helps us to get the claims paid by insurance. It also, and diagnosis can be helpful because it can give us a little bit of a framework of how we want to approach something and how we want to treat some of our symptoms, but I also don't prescribe medication. So I will always look at you as a person first before that mental illness, because I want to hear what's going on in your life. So with COVID, people are really being forced to tune into themselves. All of their outlets, whether it's going out to the bar, whether it's going to the gym, busying themselves with commuting back and forth to work, all of those busy tasks have really forced people to be like, whoa, I am not okay with just my thoughts and with the silence. The silence is super
Yeah,
loud right now.
yeah, and a lot of time to reflect, right?
Hmm.
So
A lot of time to reflect.
do you find that the time they've spent reflecting, they often come to you with feelings of regret, maybe for the past pre-pandemic life, or even the life they're living now? Talk to me a little bit about that.
It's interesting you say that, because I didn't think about that correlation. But I have a couple people in my practice right now that they're interested in the career change. They're interested in, they realize that their career right now is no longer serving them, and they're no longer feeling fulfilled. They're no longer feeling passionate about the work that they're doing. And so this has really given them that opportunity and almost that push and that encouragement to move on
Yeah.
in whatever capacity that is for them. If it's stepping away from the career entirely, maybe it's up leveling themselves in their career somehow, or maybe just taking a break and maybe spending time with their kids or visiting their loved ones, their older family. So I think it really has, and I would have never pinned that correlation. So I think that there is some regret there of, well, what would my life have looked differently, and I think in another aspect too, people have wanted to socialize, right? It's kind of like you don't want something until it's no longer available to you. So whether it's past relationships, and you've broken up and now it's like, oh man, I, regret not spending all the time or cuddling with that person, or, oh, I wish we would have traveled last year, look, now we can't travel. So I think that there definitely are feelings of regret, and I think it's eye opening for sure.
And how do you advise people to deal with those feelings of regret when someone would come to you and say, I've been working for this job for 20 years. I don't like it. It's not fulfilling me anymore. I regret doing it. How do you help them deal with that in a positive way that really helps them build up? Because I think as negative as regret can be, it really does lead to positive change. So just tell me a little bit about how you advise them. I'd love to learn about it.
And I'm sure you can already tell from us talking. I have a handful of approaches that I would take, right? So I would kind of look at it logistically and say, okay, logistically, logically, financially, what does that look like for you, right? What is blocking you from making that move? Is it fear of change, right? A lot of people don't like change, and I think there's a lot of regret and fear of change. They couple and they go hand in hand. So, for certain situations and most situations and scenarios. So, what has been stopping you? Why haven't you made that move? What will it feel like in 6 months, a year, 5 years from now? Will you be sitting in the same place, wishing you had made the decision sooner,
Yeah,
wishing you had, made that bold move sooner, right? And now it is almost too late, but it's never too late, right? And I think that that's
I
when
love that.
people start going into a cycle and a brain dump of regret. It's a spiral of regret. They feel that it's too late, and that's where that regret comes from.
Yeah. And do you find, I know you mentioned to me in other conversations, group therapy that you do as well. Do you find that when people get together and talk about, because regret is a universal feeling, it really impacts everyone. So when we all get together and we talk about our own experiences, we can find common ground and bond on that. Do you think that that helps?
I think so. And especially because you mentioned, it's a universal emotion, it's a universal feeling. So there's the connection already there, right? And a lot of the times, maybe we're not actually saying, I regret doing something. We're not calling it as it is,
Yeah.
but we hear phrases of, I just wish I did, or I should have done, right? Those are all phrases and sentiments of regret. Those are all stemmed from those feelings of regret. And so, personally, professionally, I've experienced regret. and when we meet together as a group, we get to hear other perspectives that maybe we hadn't considered, right? And so it helps us kind of reframe and see regret in a different light and see it in a way that it's almost that lesson to us. And I think if we were just to try and do that on our own, or even in a one-on-one session, I might not pick up on all of those pieces, right? I might not pick up on all aspects or all other perspectives that could turn that into a positive for you, or that could be a learning lesson or a teaching moment for you. So I think by having it come together as group, you don't feel so alone in that regret, because I think there's also shame can also be a part of that too. So it helps lighten all of that heaviness that is often felt with regret.
Yeah, and so obviously you think like comfort is drawn from those experiences, right?
Mhm. A
Yeah.
ton of comfort. Absolutely. And people find comfort in validation. People
Yeah.
find comfort when people agree with them. And not saying, I'm sure we have best friends or, people in our social circles that they just, yeah, that looks great. Yeah, yeah, good job. Or, oh, that paper really read really well. Oh, that episode looked awesome. And you're like, they're not being honest with you. They're not being truthful. So I think when it's a group process, when it's a group therapy environment, and it's not just a social circle of friends, although we are certainly capable of making that as friends, but you're there to empower, you're there to encourage others and help one another grow. And so you're hearing their hardships as well as they're hearing yours. And so there's an exchange there. Sometimes you don't get that in social groups. It's really, it's either one focused on one person or another. So there's absolutely comfort and connection in when you share it through storytelling, really.
Yeah, which is exactly what we're here for. That's why it ties in so well. I mean, it really is amazing what we are able to do when we come together and think collaboratively and just listen to one another. Like actually listen. Like what you just said, people just yesing you, but no, like actually paying attention, listening, follow up questions, like that shows. And I think it does make an enormous impact. So even with regret, I mean, is there any piece of advice that anyone's given to you in your life that's really stuck out? I know people always give you advice, but sometimes it's that one random piece that really sticks with you and forces change. So tell me a little bit about, who gives you advice in your family or your personal life, and what has stuck with you.
Yeah, I have to hats off to my partner, Hugh. He actually, when I was becoming a mom, when I was pregnant, I was starting to kind of go through the spiral of, well, I planned to do maternity leave for about 4 months. And, I was kind of verbalizing not really planning on leaving the house and spending, quote unquote, as much time with my son. Right. And he's like, no, 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 you're going to leave the house like as soon as the baby's born, because he knew what the impact and the stress level and the overall, I don't want to say burden, but the weight, right? The change in lifestyle that happens when a baby is brought on. And so Hugh was filled with a ton of lessons and pieces of information. And one of the ones that he had shared to me also, I forget if our son was already born or if I was pregnant, but he had mentioned, now it's escaping me, of course, but oh, like the comparison of children. And so maybe our son was already born and we had started to learn about a little bit of his global developmental delays and that he was not really progressing as much as kids typically his age. And there's a lot of regret there on wishing we had advocated for our son sooner, wishing that we had changed pediatricians a lot sooner. And so we can't change any of that, and that's okay. And so kind of learning to accept that. But he told me, don't don't compare your child to another child. Like you'll never be happy. You'll never be happy for our child in the moment. And I'm paraphrasing because he said it way more eloquently than I am right now, but it really does help put it into perspective to see that and of course we love our child, but when you see another 2.5-year-old, running around on the playground, and like my meetups with moms are going to be with younger children because that's kind of the stage that he's in right now. And that's okay. So it's learning that connection. It's learning that development. So, but I think I don't know. I think
No,
that's
that
really
makes
helpful.
Yeah. And you said you meet up with other moms, like with their kids, or so. I guess my first thought would be how helpful it would feel for you if when you were in that stage going through what you were going through with your son and trying to identify like his learning disability or his developmental disability. So, do you think it would have been helpful to hear from another mom who was going through the same thing or had gone through the same thing? If you were watching a time capsule of someone older, just tying that back in, because that's really what at the end of the day we're working to do, is through storytelling to heal and to help others. So do you think that would have been helpful for you?
I think so. I think it really would have brought some reassurance because, that's what happens kind of when we get a diagnosis, right? Or even when we start Googling symptoms. We all
Yep.
become pretend doctors. We all become, these people, and we're all speculating, right?
Yep.
So I'm in a group. Our son, so far right now, he's gone through pretty much the gamut of testing. So any listeners that have any ideas, please message me, find Hugh, find Elyse,
Yep.
contact us. But right now he just has diagnosed as a global developmental delay and hypotonia. And so really those are such broad diagnoses that, you try and find a Facebook group, and it's sure they have hypotonia as part of their symptoms, but they have all these other diagnoses that have worldwide foundations for them, and it's like, that's great. You already have like support. And so we kind of feel small, we feel left out. And anyone who's really searching for that diagnosis of, a clearer diagnosis, right? A more succinct, this is what's going on, so I kind of forget what the question was, but
No, if someone was in a similar position as you,
yes.
yeah, talking about their own experience,
Mhm.
because at the end of the day, it's going to become like a network of human
Yeah.
experience. We will be the
And
last
Hugh actually
experiences, right? Yeah.
Yep. And Hugh actually just sent me an article yesterday morning about someone who was diagnosed with hypotonia. The doctors never thought that he would really progress with walking and moving the way that he is. And now I think he's in high school playing football, and in the article, she's like, I just wish that the doctors would see him now, so I really almost think that capturing that mother's story in, look at my son, look at everything that he was told he couldn't do, and look at what he's doing now.
And the
So I
evolution.
think that it would be super helpful.
Yeah, I think it also would be really interesting if the mother, for example, had done a time capsule when she had received the news about the diagnosis and was feeling kind of hopeless, and then did like 5 years later or whatever, another one to kind of prove like this is what happened, and then they could use that even at like medical conferences as inspiration. What do you think?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because, you know, when there's something so unique about video,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so through video, we're capturing not only the story, right? But it's our tone, it's our pitch, it's our body language, it's the animation in what we're saying, right? So there's so much underlying subconscious, language that is being shared. And when you're able to compare that. So if we're going through a depressive time, or we're going through a really difficult time, you can see how far you've come. You can see how resilient and how truly strong you are when you watch that 6 months from now, a year from now, 5 years from now. You can also see the growth of children, right? You can hear laughter again. You can't really hear laughter in reading a letter. You can't really hear anybody's voice in a picture, right? And so we rely on our memory. And so what happens when we pass, and now our children don't know their grandparents' laughter, and our son, really, he only has one grandparent now. Our daughter doesn't, I don't believe she has any living grandparents right now. So she's kind of got my grandma as a
Yeah.
support, and then my mom and dad. So it's, really trying to capture all of that before everybody's gone, and leaving legacies, leaving just our stories, and for the authenticity that they are, because otherwise it can just be a bad game of telephone, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And I can't interpret my journals from when I was in elementary school, middle school, because they're all like symbols and code words. So I need someone to translate them for me, and I wrote them. So
Yeah, no, absolutely. It reminds me, actually, what you said just now reminds me of this stat that I read earlier, that was communication is 91% tonality and 9% words. So,
Yes.
say something to you, but if I'm saying it in a completely different way, it comes off differently. The beauty of video, right, is that we get to capture that. So I think that's amazing. I think the medium in which we're doing it is really great as well. Yeah, I don't know. Let me know what you think.
Yeah, there's a quote, and I'm probably going to butcher it, but again, it
Okay.
kind of circles back to it. But people don't always remember what you say, but they will always remember how you make them feel. And that's really what it is too, is capturing that emotion, capturing the essence of what is being shared. And, but through the video as well, you get that authenticity. You're able to capture it from the source, right? Or from a source that is super close to that person, which is huge.
And not to go too off track, I just thought of a question. But at the group therapy, I know you work with people that struggle with addiction, for example. Do you think it would be helpful to maybe put a time capsule up, a video up of someone who had been struggling with addiction and had either, figured it out and become clean, that kind of thing? I think these could also become helpful tools for awareness and marketing in that kind of way, especially when it comes to, I think we spoke on the phone about it, about drug problems and domestic abuse as well. So I'm interested to see how a licensed social worker would look at using time capsules in a really innovative educational way, if that makes any sense.
I think so. I think, depending on the process, right? I think it would be really cool almost capturing one at intake or before they're even really, clean, or when before they're truly able to process trauma. And it doesn't have to be long, and it's what's really nice about this too, it's not invasive. It's not, maybe they're not ready to share in a group. So it is a way to kind of get their story out there, and then when they're ready, they can share another one, or they can add on to that one and show, look how far I've come, right? They can see their smile brighten. They can see hope in their eyes now. We're no longer in those states and those sentiments of despair and of burnout and of exhaustion, right? And total loss of hopelessness. And so, I think capturing one kind of newly at the start of treatment, and then maybe at a midpoint, or when they're almost, even maybe at graduation, right?
Yeah.
At almost that, where they're ready to discharge, they're ready to terminate services, because they've got it down pat. And so almost kind of doing, I know a lot of times there's journal prompts, right? A letter to yourself in 5 years or 10 years, right? So almost kind of doing a video to your future self of like, you
Exactly.
got this, and you have it for when you're having a hard time.
Mhm.
I do, again, I go back to Hugh. He's my biggest supporter, and
Cute.
yeah, I love him. I hope you're watching, babe. um, he typed out and wrote a letter for me, and, highlighting some of my accomplishments, because I am a hard critic of myself. And so, when I do get down, I remember to pull it out and I read it and I sob and I feel better. Right. I think coupled with the sobbing, right. But also just that reminder, right. That note to self, although I didn't write it, but someone very close to me and very special to me wrote it. And it's that note to self to keep moving on, to keep believing in myself. Right. And so capturing that at point of discharge, capturing that at termination, is, I think, would be really helpful for people to have when, if and when they start to kind of slip back.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely think that that's something, we were talking a little bit earlier before the podcast, and it kind of struck me how impactful that would be, because I, for one, am someone who actually used to do video diaries. So I used to sit in front of my, Apple, my MacBook Pro, and look at the photo booth and do a little video diary. And I always found that for me, writing out, like, I was a journalism major, I love writing, but something about writing it out, I didn't get my emotion on paper. I'm a very emotional person. So I wanted to just look myself in the face. It was something really cool also about, like, watching a video of your past self talking to you. It felt really personal. So it's almost like, Elyse, like, you want to lose weight, like, don't binge eat. Like, I don't know, like something that you wouldn't think would make such an impact, but it does, because you watch it and you remember, okay, I said this, or I remember a little TMI, but I don't really care. Like, post breakup, like, you're looking at the video and you're like, okay, don't go back to them. You know they really upset you. You know they did these things, and just remember that. And I think you're almost like you kind of walk in with regret, right? Because you had like a bad relationship or a bad relationship ending, but you finish by like giving yourself some advice that you actually will listen to. And as much as I cherish those videos close to my heart, I am now aware of data rot through working with Not Forgotten. So, after the 10-year mark, all of the videos that we have, photos and videos, can start to rot away. So, the way that I explain it for any of the listeners who don't know what data rot is, totally fine. I didn't either. But for example, if you have an old photograph, it will turn brown, the ends will kind of curl up, and you'll know that it's old. Of course, you could still look at it, but it's just not as good as when it was first taken. That actually happens to our data in a digital format. So our data will begin to rot and decay. And although we have paid for additional cloud storage, it's not going to last. Unfortunately, we just take so many videos and photos every day that it's physically impossible for this all to be in perfect quality until we die. And that's just the truth. And it's a hard pill to swallow. But I recognize now that those journal entries I did to myself will not be able to hold up, but they will be if I put them in my time capsule. So that's something that I've realized, and I think that's really great. Also, with your letter, I totally want you to digitize that. When you put that in your capsule, you just scan it, and we'll put it right.
Yes.
Yeah,
I'm totally for that.
So for some reason, my iPad's slowly dying. I'm gonna run get a charger. But Lena, it's your show now. So tell the audience a little bit about about how you personally deal with regret. While I just go fix this tech issue.
Sure. Okay. So in dealing with regret, I think it's allowing ourselves to recognize, what are we regretting? Are we regretting that we didn't take the chance? Are we regretting that we didn't, date that person, or didn't go to live somewhere else? A little personal regret of mine. I wouldn't even call it regret, because I've learned to come to accept it and be like, okay, well, this is how the cards played out, and this is what I'm really grateful for, because I'm happy where I am right now. And if things hadn't fallen into place, but when we're in that initial stage of regret, we can't see all of that, of course. But it's kind of like that hindsight, right? That hindsight bias that we have later on. But I almost wish that I had taken the time to explore different colleges outside of New Jersey. I ended up going to Monmouth University, and I don't regret that decision at all. But I would have wished I could have explored other states, right? And learned or explored different lifestyles in different states. But then, again, I'm really grateful. I'm grateful for all the opportunities that I've had. I just wish that someone had said, hey, really consider and explore out of state states, out of state colleges when you're looking for your major. And so I just wish someone had done that for me. And my guidance counselor really didn't do that. So I just wish someone had taken the time to be like, hey, consider this option, because 5 years from the road, you might want to live in a different state, and you'll have the opportunity to have already done that.
Yeah.
So in kind of coping with regret, right? I think it's being able to kind of inhale and just pause for a moment and honor those feelings of regret, honoring those feelings of the I should have, I would have, if I could have, right? But then not staying there for too long, because we can totally do that dance for hours, and it leaves us still in that same place of regret, and it's not healthy, right? It's not helpful. What is helpful is saying, okay, well, that isn't the scenario, that isn't what played out, but this is what's happening right now. This is what's in the present moment. And so I can either really be, down about it, or I can start making decisions to shift my perspective and to shift towards the life that I want to create, or the career that I want to have, or the place that I want to move to. And so how can we shift, right? How can we narrow in that focus? And I always, when I talk to my clients, right, I go from peripheral thinking, right, of like, okay, everything else that's on the rise, and then really just narrowing down into that present moment.
Yeah. No, I absolutely love that. Yeah, this is great. So I think we've all come to the conclusion that regret's universal, but we can heal through collaboration, through talking about it, either to yourself or in a group, right? It's both helpful. Just getting it all out there, and you never know who's going to benefit from your shared experience, who's going to benefit from you really opening up and being vulnerable and taking off that mask and being who you are. Oftentimes, like we talked about with validation, when you're sitting in front of a time capsule and, if you buy like the Time Traveler, for example, that's just an interviewer will run through some questions with you, and then you look and you're filmed for an hour, and your like loved one will receive like a stunning film. It's 30 minutes long. So it's not like these are like massively long. It's a 30-minute clip where you can really put some good input in there that you'd be able to give, to your children. So especially with you, Lena, you can tell your kids like, hey, maybe, if you want to move states and go to a different college, that's totally fine. Like I did this. And I also think just one more thing to note is, it's one thing to listen to an older person, but I watched a video of my mom like 2 weeks ago, and she was like 23 years old. I just turned 24, but she was like my age at the time that I watched it. And she was in a lab, and my mom was a toxicologist. She worked really long to get her PhD. And I kind of always, I don't want to say I didn't believe her. Like, obviously I knew she was my age at one point, but I didn't really I wasn't able to picture it in my head, like my mom being my age. So every time she gives me advice, I'm like, oh, Mom, of course, like you're just my mom. Like, what do you know? But at the end of the day, she was in my shoes, and seeing that footage of her being my age, I was like, I'd probably be friends with this woman. So like I would probably be friends with this lady, and she probably has some good things to say, and she has lived through it, and it was very eye-opening for me, just hearing her and seeing her like as my age, if that makes sense. So I think seeing a time capsule, like if you made one right now, giving your daughter advice, and she was like, you know what I mean? Like I think that would be super impactful. I think sometimes we brush off our parents because we don't think that they understand us when really they've been in our exact same shoes.
And I was just about to say, I'm sure you're brushing her off a lot less now and you're taking her advice or at least considering it.
I'm giving it some thought for sure. Some more than before. I don't know why. It seems so silly, but I'm like, wow, my parents were my age at once, so maybe they actually know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So that
yeah, I think regret has a lot to highlight, has a lot to teach us, right? And if we look at it as, okay, what is this teaching me, right? What are these emotions teaching? I think that that's how we can cope with it and move through it and not just stay there. And, capturing video, capturing our stories, and hearing other stories, it's awesome.
and making sure these stories stay alive, right? Because they're preserved for 150 or 300 years. So, or even 50. If you just want to do the 50-year one, you want to be modest, like, yeah, you can do that as well. But like these stories are preserved for such a long time. And for people listening who don't really have an idea, 300 years is actually equivalent to 10 descendants. So 10 generations of your family will be able to watch your video. I think that's just like a really like earth-shattering fact that I found out. Because I don't even know who 10 descendants of my family were. So how cool would it be to be able to like watch them actually speak to you instead of just like an old black and white photo where you can't really make out their face?
Right. It's definitely something super unique, and I'm excited for it. I'm excited to see where this goes and how many stories are shared.
Yeah, I'm super excited. I can't wait to make yours as well.
Me
Um,
too.
But wow, I knew that so Lena and I talk all the time for a while. So I knew that we would hit the 30-minute mark super easy, but that's actually our episode for tonight, guys. So Lena, before you go, I want you to plug your social media in there for anyone who is looking to get in contact with you or wants to maybe book an appointment, anything. Just let the crowd know what the
Let
best.
loose. So my main social media is Lena Suarez Angelino. I'm sure there might be show notes somewhere because my name's kind of long. And then I also have started a Facebook group called Light Collective, Light, and that stands for Let It Go Here Today Collective. And so anyone is welcome to join who's experiencing burnout. And just kind of helping to go through those motions. That's a new group that I'm forming. But yeah, so my social media, my website is Lena Suarez Angelino, and that'll kind of be the most up-to-date information.
Awesome. And when you guys go on her website to like it, make sure to head over to Not Forgotten's Facebook page. Chuck that a like too. Stay up to date with what we're doing on our Instagram. It's Take Me Back Time Capsule. And then we have two websites. One is not-forgotten.com. And then makemytimecapsule.com if you actually want to make a product. And of course, we are available on Amazon. But for this podcast, we are just focusing on more on conversation, give you an idea of what could go into a time capsule if you wanted to make one, and really elevate the conversation around stories, specifically for this episode. Obviously, we talked about regret. But yeah, so Lena, thank you so much for joining us. It's always such a pleasure talking to you. You bring so much depth and life into the conversation. I really appreciate you taking your time out today on Friday night.
Oh, I appreciate that, Elyse, and I appreciate everyone who tuned into us and even catches the replay. Let us know. I really appreciate it, and thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. And she will be here again, guys. Don't.
Yes, promise.
So that's all for tonight. I'm going to log off, but really great episode, and we'll see you guys